All right. Well, it's great to have the crew back together again. And thank you everyone for reading my emails and for coming at this time. So, all right, let's pick it up. And I think we left off at a really great point. I didn't leave you hanging in the middle of a sugya. We're at the top of 34b, top of Lamed Dalet Beis, and we're going to talk about the numbers of species that you have to have. Now, we all know what you have to do at the end of the day, right? But we're starting with a new Mishnah now. So it's fresh, even if you weren't with us in the past. It's a new Mishnah, a new Sugya, a new day. So here we go. Rabbi Shmuel Omer. This might sound familiar. It hopefully sounds familiar. Shlosha Hadassim. You have to have 3 Hadassim, Shtei Aravos, 2 Aravos, Lulav Echad, Esrog Echad. 1 Lulav and 1 Esrog. In case you're not familiar, that's what we do, actually. That's Halacha L'Maisa. But the question is, we mentioned in a previous Mishnah that one of the disqualifications for Hadassim is if the top gets clipped off, if they get decapitated. But the question is, what if only some of them are decapitated? Does that passel the entire bunch? So, afilu shnayim ketumim ve'echad eno katum. According to Rabbi Shmuel, there's 3 opinions in the Mishnah. Rabbi Shmuel holds, as long as one of them remains fully intact, even if the other 2 were decapitated, it's okay. It's good. Rabbi Tarfon agrees on the general number of species that you need, meaning of how many each respective species. Everyone agrees 4 species, but how much of each of those species? Right? Tarfon Omer, afil shlushtan ketumim. Even of all 3, the queen says off at their heads, all 3 of them are knocked out, it's still kosher. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Kishem Shalulav Echad, Esrog Echad, Kachadas Echad, Varava Achas. Rabbi Kiva says, I don't get where you're coming up with this, right? We all agree 1 Esrog, one Lulav. So what's this funny business of 3 Hadassim and 2 Aravos? Well, I'm so glad that you asked that, because the Gemara is going to cite a brisa. The brisa will essentially reiterate what we have in the Mishnah already. But like what happens many times is that these later brisos, or I think they're later at least, they will expand upon the conversation that the Mishnah does not necessarily get to. Many times, I'm thinking about the first Mishnah in Tainus. There's a machlokis over there, and the Brisa and the Gemara, and there's like a brief back and forth, and then the Brisa continues their conversation. So that's what we're going to see over here. So there's a little bit of repetition. Tanya, Rabbi Shmuel Omer, same thing as the Mishnah. Pre-Eitz Hadar, Echad. So we need 1 pre-Eitz Hadar, 1 Esrog. Kapos Tamarim, Echad. Right, and 1 Kapos Tamarim, 1 Lulav. Anaf Eitz Avos Shlosha. Now, how do I get 3 for Arav, for Hadassim? So if you look at Rashi, Rashi tells us we parse each word. Anaf Eitz Avos. The fact that the Torah had to give me this very lengthy description in 3 words is to symbolize, it's to indicate to us that you need 3 of them. Arvei Nachal, following that same logic. Shtayim, that teaches me I need 2. Whereas beforehand, when it has the word pre, or it has the word kapos, it's not written with the extra vav, that's to teach us it's only 1 esrog and 1 lulav. Okay. Fafilu shnayim ketumim ve'echad she'ino katum. Rabbi Tarfa, sorry. So if 2 are decapitated but 1 is not, they are still kosher. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Shlosha ketumim. True, you need 3 Hadassim, but if all 3 of them are clipped, that's okay. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Kishem Shalula Vecha Ve'esrog Echa Kachadas Echa V'Rava Achas. And Rabbi Akiva, again, just like it says in the Mishnah, nothing new yet, says that you only need 1 of each species. No funny business. Now, this is where the Brisa gives a little bit more information than what we had originally. Many Girsos apparently take out the word lo. It's not a response. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Yachol Yehi Esrog Iman Baguda Achas. Now, another question that perhaps we have wondered, I've certainly wondered this one, is wait a minute. If the idea is we're supposed to bind them together, why do I bind the Lulav Hadassim and Aravos in one hand, but the Esrog stays independent in the other? So if you ever wonder that question, this is the source for it. Rabbi Eliezer, Yachli Esrog Iman Baguda Achas. Now, I would think once we're binding everything together, the esrog ought to go together. But you have to read the pasuk very closely. V'chinemar pri eitz hadar ukapos tamarim. Does it say you shall take an esrog and a lulav? No, there's no vav over there. There's no word and in the Torah. Nemar ela kapos. If you have the Torah or Hashalem in your text of the Gemara, even if you have the art scroll in the Vilna edition, right? The actual traditional page of Gemara, relatively speaking, you can see the pasuk, the first pasuk that's quoted there from Vayigra Chav Gimel pasuk Mem. It says Olakachtem lechem b'yom harishon pri eitz hadar kapos tamarim. There's no vav, so that teaches us that there's a separation between the esrog and the lulav. But then once we mention the lulav, it says va anaf eitz avos vi arve nachal. So the vavs connect them together. And that's the diak, that's the close reading that indicates to us that the esrog remains independent. And as you guessed, I'm sure there's a nice amount of Sukkah morning sermons that come out of this. But we'll leave it as it is. Okay. But the interesting thing is, this is a case that comes up many times where someone, Rahman al-San, has to get a huge cast that goes over their entire arm. They can't even put, the cast goes up so high, Rahman al-San, that they can't even put the bias of their tefillin on their arm. So the halacha is that the shel rosh and shel yad are two independent mitzvos. If you can't put on your shel yad, you could still put on the shel rosh of your tefillin. So I would think to myself, if all I have is a lulav and hadassim, and I don't have an esrog and a ravos, maybe I still fulfill some mitzvah. So the Gemara tells us, says, so how do I know that I require all four? And if I only have three, I do not fulfill the mitzvah. Tamalomar, it says, ulekachtem. And the way that they parse it is, ulekach tem. Now, kachtem means, and you should take, kachtem lechem, you should take for yourself. But the tem is being separated. You have to read it as a, conjunction. That tam is a separate word. Tam means to be kind of like complete. It should be a complete taking. So when you take the four species, you need each and every one of them. And again, as you guys guessed it, it's one of those classic Sukkot morning sermons about how it represents different kinds of Jews, and we need to have all of them together. Okay, very nice. So, but here's actually the halachic source for it. There you go. Any questions at this point, my friends? Okay, well, I'm glad it's smooth sailing as of now. Rabbi Yishmael. So let's interrogate Rabbi Yishmael's shita for a little bit. Rabbi Yishmael has a little bit of an awkward shita. You see, we have Rabbi Akiva who says you only need one hadas. We have Rabbi Tarfon who says you need three hadas, but all three could be decapitated. What is this weird sheet that it says you need three hadasim, but two cut off is okay, but three cut off is bad? So the Gemara says, right? Manashach ish leimin by libay nami kulam ilo by shleimin afil chanami lo. So I don't get it. Like, how are you parsing this, Rabbi Yishmael? Either you need three hadassim or you don't need three hadassim, right? If you need three hadassim, then how does it help for two of them to be cut off? It's like they're not even there. Command to listen to dummy is the lashon that Rashi uses. It's like they're not even there. They're puzzle. And if you don't need all three, then just tell me you only need one hadas. Why do I need to bring two more in there? So what is the logic in saying you need three, but two could be chopped up and puzzle? So Amar Bira, Rashi tells us this is someone's name. Amar Avami, Chazar bo Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael backed off and he rescinded his position. What does that mean? So Rashi explains, what did he back off from? Mitchilas Devar, from the beginning of what he said. Mechash bechad. He says you only need one hadas. In other words, he seems to concede to Rabbi Akiva shita. Umiyu hadarbai. But that one hadas that you need to have, that one hadas needs to be hadar. It can't be, dried out. Depending if that's root in hadar or not, but it has to be a good quality hadas. So Rabbi Shmuel seems to have taken a step back on that one. which basically leaves us with two shitas in the end of the day. Now it's essentially Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva, who hold you only need one hadas, versus Rabbi Tarfon says you need three hadasim, albeit if all three of them are clipped, it's okay. So it's a quantity versus quality machlokes, it would seem, between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel on the quality side and Rabbi Tarfon on the quantity side. All right? Now I should clarify, even Rabbi Tarfon would say ideally you should have three complete hadassim, but b'di'evet it would not disqualify it. And that's relevant for the next piece of Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Yehuda Amar in the name of Shmuel says the halacha is in accordance with Rabbi Tarfon, who says you need three hadassim, albeit they can be clipped up. But Azda Shmuel Tameh, and how do we see that Shmuel is consistent with his opinion that he follows Rabbi Tarfon? The Amar Lehu Shmuel Lahano de Mizani Asa. You would say to those who were selling the hadassim, Ashu Zavinu, make your prices reasonable and equal. Don't try ripping people off. If you ever go, it can be quite a balagan. If you ever go to like the shuk, whether it be like at Kew Garden Hills or Muncie or somewhere, you have no idea what's flying. You go to one vendor, he offers you 70, other ones like 35. You have no clue what's going on. I don't know if I have no clue what's going on. I just go through the shul. It's much easier. Too much, but some people enjoy it. And if you know what you're doing, God bless you. But he says, don't play these games with people. And if you start selling your hadassim at these expensive prices below, and if you don't listen to me, Darshina Rabbi Tarfon, I will tell everybody that the halacha is in accordance to Rabbi Tarfon, that you don't need three quality hadassim, but you could suffice even with three clipped up ones. So meanwhile, people are paying a premium to have these beautiful, clean, complete hadassim, but I'll tell everybody we pass them like Rabbi Tarfon. So my taima, wait, but what's he trying to do over here? If he's trying to intimidate these store owners, that he's going to tell everyone that they don't have to spend so much money, why does he just tell them to pass? Why does he just threaten them even better? It's in yeshivish talk. The way they always expresses is that my Rebbe, if you ask a question, I remember in high school, I asked my Rebbe a question. Say, "Oh, you're saying good. Say better." You ever hear that one? Okay, it's like that's a good question. Keep going. So if you want to really threaten these store owners, tell them that you're going to reveal to everyone the sack is in accordance with Rabbi Akiva that you only need one hadas, not three hadassim. So the Gemara turns back and says, three clipped ones you could find easily. One non-clipped one complete one, that's harder to come by. And again, I'm sure there's a good Shabbos morning sermon topic from that one, right? That it's easy to find three clipped ones, but to find one complete one, that's a needle in a haystack, right? So that's our third drasha topic for tonight, everyone. As you can see, I haven't figured out my drasha. I figured out my Shabbos morning sermon today. Don't worry, guys. I think I got it. We'll see how it comes out. Might be some reference to current events, Toby. So watch it. It'll be very subtle, though. It'll be very subtle, more subtle than last time. But you guys get to hear it here first. Okay. You can see what I posted on Facebook. It's a good hint. It's a good hint of where I'm going. You don't have to log on now, though. All right. There is a Tosfos on here, which makes an important point. So this whole Gemara seemingly was trying to demonstrate that Shmuel is in accordance with Rabbi Tarfon. But then the Gemara asks the following question. You see, the Gemara asks, well, couldn't he threaten the store owners that he paskins like Rabbi Akiva? But how could he even have a havamina? How can he even consider making such a threat if he holds like Rabbi Tarfon? So it sounds almost like the Gemara was considering him lying and saying, hoping they won't call his bluff. I don't paskin like Rabbi Akiva, but I'll threaten you that I'll tell everyone to go according to Rabbi Akiva. Because the only reason he doesn't threaten with Rabbi Akiva, according to the Gemara, is because Rabbi Akiva is actually not more makel. It's a bigger threat to paskin like Rabbi Tarfon. So it actually, Tosfos says from the end of the Gemara, Olam lo tishma desar karbi tarfam. Actually, the Gemara didn't really accomplish what it wanted to do. At the end of the day, the way you have to read the Gemara is that we leave off with a question. We don't have a proof positive that Shmuel rules in accordance with Rabbi Tarfon from here, because the only reason he may have paskin like Rabbi Tarfon or threatened to paskin like Rabbi Tarfon was because that would be the most expedient thing to do, because that would be the most makel shita, which would deprive the store owners of making more money. So we don't have a proof from here. And we're not going to go down the whole rabbit hole of Tosfos, but it's a very fascinating question that emerges from the shock of Atari and Tosfos about, can you like threaten to paskin like an opinion that you don't personally hold of? So it's a bit of a lengthy, a little bit of a back and forth in Tosfos. They bring in the Gemara and Pesachim where someone seems to be doing that. And so just a question to think about from this Gemara. Can I threaten with a position I don't paskin by? It's a fascinating question. All right. Any questions before we go on to our second Mishnah of the evening? All right, my friends, moving right along. So we've talked about stolen lulavim, stolen hadatzim, stolen aravos. Now let's talk about stolen esrogim. But unlike the previous Mishnayos, in which there was only a few psulim, a few disqualifications, when we talk about esrog here, we're going to have a whole panoply of different ways that an esrog could be pasul or just pasul lechatchila, that ideally you shouldn't use it, but b'diavad it would be okay. What do I mean? Take a look at the Mishnah. Esrog hagazel vayavesh pasul. This sounds familiar. A stolen esrog, a dried esrog, shal shir shanini dachatz, an esrog that was from an ashera or is from a city that worships a Zar, it's meant to be destroyed. Pasul, that's a disqualified esrog. That sounds familiar, because everything else has that disqualification. But here's where things get interesting and new. Shel arla pasul. So arla is the first 3 years of a fruit tree. You're not supposed to benefit from it. So it's pasul. Shel truma tmeya pasul. If it's from truma, that's supposed to be given to a kohen, it becomes pasul. You're not allowed to eat it. It becomes, so the esrog is pasul. Shel truma tahora lo yitol v'natal kasher. But truma, and I'll explain the principle behind this in a moment. Shel truma tahora, Shel truma temeya lo yitol v'natal kasher. Clean truma, ritually clean truma. Ideally, you shouldn't use it for an esrog, but b'diavad, it's kosher. Shel demai is food which is questionable whether the owner took off trumas and meises from it. It's a doubt. Beis Shammai posed to be still makshir. It's Beis Shammai be still whether you can use it. Shel meiser sheni b'Yerushalayim lo yitol v'natal kasher. And meiser sheni. Okay, meiser sheni, which is.
Is that noise interfering?
I think so.
Okay,
thank you.
Sorry, I'll mute.
Good. Oh, you got it. Okay, you got it. Good job. All right.
Hello.
So meiser sheni is a type that you're supposed to eat in Yerushalayim. So if it's in Yerushalayim, it would be kosher b'di'evad. Now, what's the idea behind all this? So if you take a look at Rashi, Dibor Hamas v'natal kasher, Rashi explains, Shari yishba heter achila, because the food truma tahora and meiser sheni in Yerushalayim, they're edible. They're halakhically permitted to be eaten. Now, truma depends on who we're talking about here, and meiser sheni is dependent on where it is. But the idea is that the esrog on the first day has to be lechen. You have to own it. In halacha, if you cannot benefit from something, then you are not considered the owner over it. So this is an interesting thing that comes up in Hilchos Pesach. We sell the chametz at a very interesting window of time, because there's about an hour where chametz on Erev Pesach morning for an hour or so becomes forbidden for us to eat, but is still still permissible for us to benefit from. So that's when we are actually burning our chametz. That's when we're selling it also. Why do we burn our chametz then? Because the mitzvah is tashbisu. We have to destroy chametz that we own. you're gonna say I own it, I just can't benefit from it. No, halachically, you're not considered an owner if you can't benefit from something. If you can't eat something, you're still the owner. You just can't eat it. So once we can no longer eat the chametz, that's when we burn it, and it's also when we sell it to the guy. If we wait too long and we wait until the zman comes that we're no longer allowed to benefit from the chametz, then the issue is you can't even sell the chametz anymore at that point because you're no longer the legal owner. But the issue is that there's this interesting idea in Hilchos Chametz that Hashem ensures that even though you can't benefit from it, l'chumra, stringently, you are still considered the owner to your detriment, but not enough that you could transfer it. So that's just an area in halacha where that comes up. It leads to interesting theoretical cases of like, I don't know, let's say you own, I don't know, make up anything. I own this safer, and it gets ejected into hyperspace. And it's on a comet. It hits a comet, and the comet's going at whatever. I'm never going to be able to benefit. I'll never catch up to it. So, am I still considered the owner over it or not? It's an interesting question. If something's behind an impenetrable wall, am I still considered the owner over that item? Now, halachically, I could benefit from it, but practically, I can't benefit from it. So, am I still considered the owner? These are interesting theoretical questions that come up.
Rabbi?
Rabbi? Yes.
What's done during a Shemitah year? I don't know.
We don't work the land?
Yeah. I mean, where do we get etrogim from? I don't even know.
So Sroge Shemitah is an interesting discussion. Part of the idea, you're allowed to eat Shemitah fruit. The issue is working the field, questions of doing business with them. And also you have to remember that we say mitzvahs lav lehanos nitnu, even when you're using something. But there's actually an interesting shuvah from Rav Moshe about esrogei shmita that were imported to the U.S. And he doesn't call out the Satmar Rebbe by name, but the Satmar Rebbe, he says a gon echad. Like the Satmar Rebbe apparently said people who get esrogim from the Shemitah year from Eretz Yisrael are kofrim and they're heretics and blah 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 blah. And Rosh's like, you could object on halachic grounds, but I don't think it makes you a koper. I don't think it makes you a heretic for getting a Sroge Shemitah. So it's led to interesting halachic discussions. I think we had a Sroge Shemitah the last go around. Was it a year or two ago?
Yeah.
So we had a Sroge Shemitah, and the idea was you're supposed to kind of let it degrade on its own, and then once it's no longer edible, then you could bury it. That was the.
I'm surprised it wasn't listed here. That's why I asked you. It's not in the Gemara.
No, it's
or not here with the Orla and
there's no Isser Achila on
Truma.
it. There's no Isser Achila.
Well, Rabbi, I don't understand. What do you mean? There's no Isser Achila? Why wouldn't there be an Isser Achila and Isser like for any other fruit?
You're allowed to eat Shemitah fruit. In fact, the halacha is the issue is working your field and then acting like the owner over the field. But
why is it then that we don't import fruits from Israel during Shemitah? Why, if the whole, this is like the exact opposite of everything I've always understood. I thought you're not allowed to eat the produce unless you just happen to find it on the ground or something.
Right, so this gets into the whole question of oats are basted and different loopholes that people did in order to benefit from the field. But fundamentally speaking, you're allowed to go. Remember, we talked about this in Sefer. I guess we have to get Sefer Chinuch, but going again. But you could go over to someone's field and you could it's questionable, but you could basically pluck a grape off and you could eat it. There's no.
Right, but I'm not supposed to benefit by selling it, right?
Yeah, but fundamentally, anyone can eat the food, and that's all we need. For Rashi, the question is am I allowed to eat the food? If I'm allowed to eat it, then there's nothing preventing me from that. Indicates I can be the owner over it. So I can plug
So
an
if I have my own apple tree,
I
can eat my own apple tree.
You can eat from it, but you're not supposed to basically, take it off en masse and then sell and stuff. But you're allowed to pluck off your own apple tree.
But what aren't we talking about using it for making a bracha, for using it during Sukkot?
That's what we're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, but we're not eating it usually. An etrog or any of those other
right,
things.
the point is that
Oh.
we want to figure out, is this lachem? Are you the owner over it? So if there's something that I'm not allowed to benefit from and not allowed to eat, there's something lacking in the lachem. There's something lacking my ownership over it for the first day. So it's not that you need to eat it. It's that eating is indicative of ownership over it. That's the idea. All right, anyway, we have other disqualifications to get to, my friends. Also, chazazis aruba. If a chazazis comes on, so chazazis is usually like a rotting. I'm actually curious, how do they translate it in the art scroll?
I have to find it. Well,
Usually like a rotting, like little blackness on the esrog. I'm curious how they render it.
what's the word you said?
I have-
Possesses?
Uh-huh.
Boil.
I have boil. Yeah.
Boil.
Mine also says boil too.
Okay, interesting. So they render it as boil. Mm-hmm.
Boil
Nice.
like
Right, look at Rashi. Rashi says "Min ababuos tacos," like
Mm.
thin boils. That's how Rashi renders it. Makes sense. All right. Also chazazis arubo. So if there is a chazazis on most of it, meaning, in other words, if the majority of the circumference, we'll get into these details at another point. But basically, when you're looking, I love it whenever people come to look. Not everyone, but some people come to look for estrogim and stuff. Many times people don't even know what they're looking for. They look at estrog and they're like, oh, this looks good. Okay. So it's important to know the difference between, you have the main part of the estrog, you have the chotem, which is where it begins to incline a little bit, where it begins to narrow out. So a chazaz is on the chotem, we generally consider to be a disqualification anywhere on it. But for the rest of the esrog, if it covers the majority of it, so meaning if you have like two specks and you like kind of draw a line between two specks and that covers the majority of the circumference between the two of them, then that's what we're talking about over here. So also because it's aruba or nata pitmaso, this is the most famous one perhaps. If the pitum falls off, niklaf, if some of the skin is taken off, nistak, if it is nistak is if they what do you call it? Is another it's another hole that you make in. It goes. Yeah, I have a good picture of it. 1 second, I'll show it to you guys.
It says here if it was split.
Yeah, I'll show it to you. It's where is it? It's where it goes across the whole thing like it splits. Stuck in. So I find a good picture for you guys. Some of these things are just hard to describe. Let's see if I can turn the zoom around for a moment. All right, here we go. So if you look over here, this one right here, that's nistak, where it has a slit, so to speak, going from the front to the back. Okay, like chor mustakos are nooks and nooks and crannies. Okay, there we go. I have to turn it back to face me. Okay, good.
I have a
See,
question.
my Zoom skills are still functional.
I have a question,
Yeah,
Rabbi.
yeah, Jed.
If when you bought the esrog, it did not have those blemishes, but during the Chag, it appeared.
Yeah.
What's the status of that?
Yeah. So I think a big question that you're raising, Judd, is a lot of these disqualifications in this Mishnah. There's a fundamental question about, are these disqualifications for all of Yom Tov or just for day one? For instance, one example we gave is the pitum falling off. But many poskim, I believe the Ramah among them, paskin, that if the pitum falls off, it's only disqualified for day one, when hadar is an absolute essential. But the rest of Yom Tov, if your pitum had fallen off, it would be okay. So I think there's a general question about a lot of the disqualifications in the Mishnah, which ones are fundamental disqualifications and which ones are just, for instance, lachem, lachem having ownership over the esrog clearly is only a day one issue. And for us in Galus, day two as well, because it's Sveika Yoma. But this is a question for a lot of the other things mentioned in the Mishnah about what are fundamental versus what about things that show up later on Chag. Do I have to be worried about them or not? Okay. So a lot of the, we'll talk about it in the Gemara, but the Rishonim, it's a lot of machlokas Rishonim on us over here. Okay. Okay, let's wrap up the mission, my friends. Nike b'chaser kolshu puzzle. So if you pierce a hole and something comes out, it's puzzle. Whereas also chazis al miyutav, there's only a boil on less under 50% of the circumference, diameter, one of those. Circumference. I got natal ukso. Or if you take the ukits out, so that's the bottom part of the esrog. That's the part that attaches it to the tree, the stem. Nikev lochas or kolshu, or you pierce the hole, but there was nothing that came out, then it would be kosher. Very good. Esrog akushi puzzle. The Kushian esrog is puzzle. It's a black esrog. The hayaro kikarti, if it is very dark, kind of green, like a leek. Rabbi Meir Masher Yehuda Poso. So the Tzmachloks or Meir Yehuda, whether it is kosher or not. Shiur esrog. What's the shear of an esrog? So shear esrog katan, hakatan. The minimal shear is Rabbi Meir Mer egos, like a walnut. Rabbi Yehuda Mer kebetza, like an egg. So that's the minimal shear of an esrog. If you guys come to a good Shalom this year and you find an esrog that's as small as a walnut and it's still, green and everything, that's very impressive. I wouldn't have to worry. I don't think we have to worry about that. Uba gadol, but this is one that interestingly you could have a problem with. Rabbi Yehuda says two have to fit into one hand. And the idea basically is because, you ever, I guess the men especially can appreciate this one. Think about when you're doing Hoshanis, you're balancing the esrog with your sitter, with the lulav, and you're juggling everything. So it's important that you can pass from hand to hand. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Afil Echem Sheyadav, even one of those big, I think the Tamanim, like those big esrogim that you have to have to go two-handed with it, that would still be kosher. Okay, very good. Just for the sake of getting on to Lamed Hayamanav, but we'll really do the Gemara next week, God willing. Taner Rabbanan, Pri Hadar. So what is it, Pri Hadar? Pri Hadar, we know, is this beautiful fruit of the tree that refers to an esrog. But how do I get to esrog from there? So eitz shatam eitzo upiriyav shaveh saviomer ze esrog. So what's Pri Hadar telling me? Pri, by definition, a fruit by definition comes from a tree. So it's telling us a fruit whose taste of the fruit and the taste of the tree are shared between them. That's an esrog. And we'll continue with the Gemara next time where it interrogates this assumption. But as you can imagine, spoiler alert, the Gemara will conclude that a Pri Hadar does indeed refer to an esrog. Any questions, my friends? All right. Oh, Toby, you say something or?
Yeah, so are we doing this next Thursday as well?
God willing. Yes, we are back on Thursdays by default. Next week will be 8:30 again. And then basically the week following we'll progressively reel it back a little bit as Ma'ariv begins to go get earlier in time. Okay, very good. I'm happy to be back. And Hashem should enable us to continue, as the name of the shir suggests, the weekly Talmud shir. All right, take care, everyone.
Thank
and wish
you.
you a wonderful
Thank you.
Shabbat.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Shabbos.